Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Jay Knott. I'm the Chief Business Officer of Apt Associates. I am also a board member of SID-Washington, where I chair the governance committee. It's my honor and pleasure to introduce this panel, Working Together, which I think you'll find really interesting. It sort of builds off of some of the themes we heard this morning about this need, necessity, imperative of bringing together more of the actors in our development world, the donors, the development industry, the private sector, local actors. Working together, I think, is going to touch on many of those issues from a more examined, focused way. And we have a panel and a moderator here who will take you through that journey. And I think you'll find this a great conversation with opportunity for participation from the audience. So with that, I want to welcome you to the Working Together panel and introduce our moderator, Beth Skorochod. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not sure if the microphone is on, so hopefully you can all hear me. Thank you, Jay, and thank you for all of you for joining us this morning. I know we're starting a little bit late, but I'm glad you made it here. This is going to be by far the best panel you will hear all day, if I do say so myself. But I think that really we're here to talk about something. I'm really glad to see so many folks that are interested in how we work better together. I think we could all agree that increasingly working together, partnering, collaborating has become something that's not only trendy, but important, if not vital, to the wicked, intractable problems that we're often trying to solve in international development. And there's collaboration and partnership that can happen at so many levels in the work that we do, from our donors to implementing partners, with international NGOs to local actors, with everybody and the communities that we serve and the beneficiaries. And I think, again, we can agree that there's so much leveraging of resources and expertise, and there's so many benefits that can come out of these relationships. But I think we also agree that it's hard. This is hard stuff, right? We're adding a layer of complexity to already very complex problems and programs that we're running. And so there's still questions that remain. I think we all want to do this and need to do this, better partnerships and better collaboration. But when do we do it? Under what circumstances? What are the terms with which we do that? When is a level of partnering enough partnering? I think that we're seeing a lot of evolution and real attempts at co-creation and co-ownership, especially with the communities that we serve, and I applaud those efforts. But again, I think there are challenges here that we need to face head on, and that's why we have our panel of folks here that have tremendous amount of experience and expertise in this area. I think they've partnered and collaborated across many different settings in many different sectors with many different types of partners and levels of partnership. So I'm really excited to introduce them to you all today. We have a really big group here, which I'm so excited about, but I think we're going to try to make this as interactive as possible. So I'm going to introduce each of our panelists and ask them just to say a few words about their own approach to partnership. And once they've said their piece, then I may do a kickoff question or two from the panel here, but we really invite all of you to be thinking about jotting down your own questions. We have microphones at each sort of end of the room, and we ask you to please feel free to stand up. Hopefully there will be a line of so many questions that people want to ask, but please do get up and ask those questions. We want, again, you guys to be as engaged in this as possible, and we know that there's as much experience and expertise in this in the room as there is sitting up here. So please don't be shy. Once we get through the introductions, we do invite your questions. Okay? All right, so let's get started. First, I would like to introduce Hanne Dalmut. She's the Director of Partnership Development at Concordia. And we posed a question to each of our panelists about one of the greatest challenges that they see in collaboration and engagement, partnership. And Hanne said that really syncing expectations can be tough, since this is still an evolving field, both within a specific project, but also in how to best do this. Sometimes the original envisionment of the partnership can change, and maybe what you initially thought it was going to look like isn't necessarily what it looks like at the end. And keeping partners invested in that vision, even as it changes, can often be difficult. So, Hanne, why don't you tell us a little bit about your own approaches to partnership?
Great, thank you so much. As mentioned, I am, I've got two mics. I'm the Director of Partnership Development with Concordia. Concordia is a nonprofit based in New York that exists fully to strengthen the partnering ecosystem. We do this in three ways. We convene, we connect, and we create. As a convening entity, and Burke's writing this down because I think we have the same tagline, potentially. But Concordia's flagship event is the annual summit on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly, and then we hold events throughout the year in various geographies, predominantly Latin America, Europe, and increasingly Africa. And we try to use all of these convenings to bring together stakeholders like yourselves, everyone who has this appetite to partner, whether they're at the highest decision-making level of their organization or company or government, whether it's the kind of midline partnering practitioners charged with implementing the visions that's laid out for them, or whether it's that frontline community that will be there for the long-term implementation or that are most affected by the global challenge at hold. The connect piece is our membership side, and so bringing those stakeholders into the conversation as directly as possible and ensuring that everything that we're programming on is somehow advancing their own partnering goals. And then the create side is my department. So working again with our members and the contents on our stage and really trying to think through, ensure that everything we do has some follow-on action point to it. So when you're coming to one of our events, you're not just strategically curated in a discussion and meeting potential partners, potential stakeholders, potential influencers to your own work, but also there's a full kind of team on the Concordia side to help take things forward after you leave. So that's our model, which means that I get this amazing pleasure of not only working with our members across all sorts of wicked challenges, everything from advancing healthcare to addressing urban development and housing issues, in some instances even looking at national security matters, thinking about these big challenges that are now falling in with the SDG framework. But we also hold what we call the P3 Impact Award, which acknowledges and recognizes excellence in public-private partnerships. We do this alongside the University of Virginia Darden School of Business and the U.S. Department of State. I imagine many of the organizations represented in this room have applied for this award, so thank you, because what we do with that award and the findings is bring back best practices and understand trend lines in where partnerships are going. And so then we can take all that content back into our programming, back to our members, and back to the creation of things. And so to that end, my model of partnerships is really starting first with listening, hearing what people are trying to do, bringing it back to my little web and network and thinking, how does this fit into broader challenges that other people are voiced, and looking at that layered approach to how to design a partnership. Where does this challenge intersect with this one, intersect with this resource, intersect with this stakeholder and this policy, and bringing it all together and really trying to think about these layered, complex solution sets so that people aren't unnecessarily entering into silos with the same partners that they always approach. And I'll pause there.
Great, thank you. Well, let's give Hanne a round of applause and welcome her to the panel. So there's plenty of seats actually up here in front and to the side. If people want to come and have a seat, I invite you to join us. Next on our panel, we're going to hear from Burke Fishburn. He's the executive director of the Posner Center for International Development, and he joins us from Colorado today. And for Burke, his greatest challenge is making the case for funders' investment in collaboration, and collaboration that goes beyond some of the standard or usual metrics that we use for program success, and thinking about how we measure these partnerships and what else funders get out of those partnerships beyond sort of the typical metrics and measurements for success. So Burke, why don't you tell us a little bit about your approach to partnership and collaboration?
Thanks, Beth, and good morning, everyone. First, a little bit about the Posner Center. We are based in Denver. We're a community of about 200 organizations, individuals, all working in global development, most of whom are based in Denver, surprisingly, some of whom have substantial staff presence in Denver, from Mercy Corps to Amnesty International to Educate, and some others as well. We have a community that's working in about 100 countries and pretty much across the broad spectrum of global development. Posner Center itself, and there's a quiz, our mission is to convene, connect, and catalyze
That's a good one too.
the global development community to collaborate for greater impact. So collaboration is in our DNA. That's why the organization was started. We're just 5 years old. We are still figuring it out. We don't have a lot of answers. And what we're trying to do is learn from our community, learn from the experiences of the organizations and individuals that are working together. We have about 60 tenants in our nice historic building, and we have a broader network of members. We look to the field of collaboration science to kind of figure things out. But at its most basic level, we are trying to foster personal relationships, because that's where it starts for us. From kind of the silly ping pong tournament to having coffee in our commons area to more kind of formative relationship building, either through trainings, capacity building sessions, things like that, all the way to our grants program. We have a teeny tiny grants program that fosters collaborative grant projects. We have a new symposium that we hope to scale to an international conference based in Denver, as well as a report that we're hoping to scale to a journal. So all these things we think will foster collaboration in our community, and we want to share what we are learning, expertise, the knowledge, the experience, in collaboration with the broader global development community. So in brief, that's kind of our approach to collaboration and working together.
Great, thank you. Let's give a round of applause to Burke and welcome him to the panel. And last but not least, and coming to us from the furthest away, we have Hémeryck, who's the executive director of SOS SAHEL. So he's coming to us from West Africa, via Colombia, via New York, just this morning. So, so lots of effort to get here, but he's bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and ready for the panel. So when asking Rémi about his greatest challenge in collaboration, he mentioned that it's really been a lack of systematic collaboration around sharing, especially at the local community level, really sharing best practices and experiences of local communities when they partner, when they collaborate, and then using those best practices to really scale up and impact policy change. So that's where he's seen some of the biggest barriers. So Rémi, we'd love to hear from you now a little bit about the work that you do and what your approach to collaboration and partnership is.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. The Sahel region is a huge region, huge as the United States, about 300 million people too, and most of the people are living below $1 per day. So how to address the challenge of development in so challenging region with concerning climate change, food security, and how to address the SDG. We've been working in about 11 countries in the South Sahara for the past 40 years, and we've been questioning about what is the impact of the projects we are implementing on the ground. Most of the time we speak about beneficiaries, we speak what are really the needs of the people, and maybe should we continue to think on our side to write projects, good papers, maybe good for the institution, but not really always replying to the needs of the people. And it's about 5 years ago we changed a bit of our model of work to see how we can involve much more better the communities, but not only bringing also together corporates, institutions to think together about what could be the local solution to reply to the needs. Actually, for example, in Burkina Faso and Mali, its schools are closing every day since of the insecurity. And I think one of the great main challenges is for the past 50 years, we didn't really address the needs of the people. We didn't really address the appropriation of the ownership of the work we were doing from the beginning. So what we do today is really to bring together all actors in order to reduce the gap between the ground and the policy. And one of the key questions is, farmers, they have lots of solutions to address food insecurity, to address solutions to adapt to climate change, and but most of the time, scientists, NGOs, institutions are just looking on short-term results. So this is why we launched about 3 years ago the livelihood camps and the Africa Days, which is a time to bring together all farmers, all local actors and institutions, and to make, we don't have a 3C tagline, but we could say we have a 2C. It's a bit smaller, but it's big, in fact, because it's co-construction. How to reply, exactly how to build together solutions on the long terms to address the SDG and also to get sustainability in the work that we do on the ground.
Great. Thank you, Rémi. Let's give him a round of applause and welcome. Okay. So that's enough of us talking at you. We really want to hear from you. So we would love for you to start thinking about your own questions, jotting them down. Again, we have microphones. I'm not sure if you can see them, but they're sort of here in this side of the room and also on that side of the room. If you want to just get up and please move to the microphone, and I'll point to either side. We'll take a couple questions at a time. While you're doing that, I'm going to take the liberty as moderator to ask one of my own questions of the panel. But please do, we want to hear from you guys. We know you have a lot of experience in doing this, and we really want to be able to be responsive and interactive to your comments and your questions. So don't be shy. Please come up and come to one of the microphones. While we're waiting for all of you to do that, I'd love to ask a question. And I think it was, Burke, that you said this, and I really, it hits home for me too, is that collaboration, partnerships, they're not, yes, they are between organizations, but at the end of the day, it's really about people and personal relationships and building those personal relationships. So while we can have best practices around collaboration and partnership, those best practices need to change and evolve based on the relationships that we have with one another, which I think is really interesting. So my question is sort of what are the very basic mechanics or the minimum enabling conditions that you want to see for a collaboration to work? So sort of as much as possible across different types of partnerships in different settings, are there some real key components that you need to have for a collaboration to be effective? And so this is a question for everyone on the panel. I'm not sure, I will let you guys volunteer who wants to go first, because I know that's not an easy question to answer.
I can kick us off.
Great, Hanne.
Great. Sacrificial lamb. So I think for a collaboration to be successful internally, all partnering entities really have to have a culture that's supportive of partnerships. And this is not just writing it into your 5-year strategic plan saying we will partner, but it's really about creating the internal structure that incentivizes partnerships, whether it is about incentivizing impact over output, whether it is about writing in time into staff work plans and hiring specific employees or for specific skill sets so that people can actually feel the space to creatively think and invest in a partnership, whether it comes from the top, whether it's supported all the way down at all the different managerial levels. You really have to invest in that culture. Externally, for a partnership to be successful, I think that there are a few things that have to exist as well. First, Concordia sees the most success in partnerships that create a market, so that long-term, that intervention, that idea exists beyond the initial funding and that initial project scope, right? So you want to kind of foster that market and at the same time be delivering some sort of innovative solution. If the challenge exists, it's probably because what is being applied isn't working. 92% of the time, right? Like sometimes it's just about doubling down and investing in resources and doing things better, but sometimes it's about bringing in new models. And so that innovation piece should exist. And then again, this goes back to that layered element. Look at that challenge set and then look at all the different factors that are influencing it. PEPFAR is really great at this as an example, right? They know to combat HIV and AIDS in women and girls, sometimes it's about education, sometimes it's about job creation, sometimes it's about changing the community culture around reproductive rights. It's not just about, passing out reproductive phylactics, was that condoms, right? So there's different ways to do this, but thinking about the layered approach here. And so I think that those kind of conditions really have to be thought through when you're designing and implementing the partnership.
Great. Thanks, Hanne. Burke or Rémi, who would like to go next?
I'll keep it simple and brief. Three things, really. Shared goal. Got to start there. Don't have a shared goal. Why start the work? Why start collaborating? Trust and credibility. You have to have trust and credibility in your partner. Again, this kind of starts with the real personal relationship, organizational relationship. It can start at the staff level. It can start at the leadership level. It doesn't really matter, but you have to have a high level of trust and credibility with your collaborating partner. And then complementary skill set. So we're all looking at cross-sectoral approaches, whether it's in-country, regionally, whatever. You want to bring something different to that partnership, whether it's education, working with water and sanitation, or whatever it is. So really those three things: shared goal, trust and credibility, and complementary skill sets.
Thank you. Rémi.
Yeah, just also a few words, maybe less think into silos, more look at the long-term results. And there is no boundary between relief development and economy integration, market integration. For example, in Chad, one of the main products is Arabic gum, and it is harvested by women who have very poor capacity in terms of incomes and food security. But they can also look on to how to integrate the market by bringing also corporates also to be interested to the local resources.
Great, thank you.
Can I
Anything to add?
two-finger on something that Burke said?
Absolutely.
So Burke mentioned trust and credibility as well as a shared goal, and I fully endorse that. But I want to just kind of say something from a Concordia standpoint and double down on something Tara said in the opening remarks today, or the keynote. Shared goal, absolutely. You don't need shared motivations, though, right? Every organization is approaching that goal from a different vantage point, and that's totally okay. So as long as the goal, from my perspective, as long as that goal exists and is articulated, and that the shared motivations don't detract from the trust and credibility in that relationship, I think different motivation sectors is fully okay. And I think that adopting that and internalizing that is going to be essential to bringing in more private sector players, new actors, both from an organization, civil society, and government standpoint. And so I just think it's really important to delineate between those two.
Yeah, I really like that point, especially because, again, it's coming down to personal relationships, and everybody's bringing their own sort of motivations, encouragement, incentives to a partnership. And so I think if there's that shared goal, but not necessarily the need for shared motivation, I think we can get a lot done. Okay, I really want to turn this over to you guys. So I see 1, 2 people walking. Let's give them a few minutes. And actually, if you don't want to make that long walk to the microphone, if you can speak loudly and I can hear you, I can repeat your question. Okay. Why don't we go here? Please also introduce yourself and tell us where you work.
Sure. Hi, is this working? My name is Yael Shapira, and I work for a small organization called Olam. We are a community or a coalition of partner organizations, and we actually have convene, connect, and communicate. So currently we're not original here. So my question is, what you just said is about building relationships, and what happens if the relationship or the partnership is kind of based on those individuals, and those individuals move to other organizations? How do you build the sustainability within the culture in the organization? Thank you.
Thank you. Let's take one more question. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Beth Cunningham. I'm with IBTCI, and we do a lot of monitoring and evaluation work for USAID, as well as supporting their collaborating, learning, and adapting agenda. And one of the challenges that we've faced is while everyone in theory recognizes that collaboration and working together is a good thing, there's a lot of on-the-ground realities that prevent that. Part of that is competition, that there's a reluctance to kind of share trade secrets and things like that. Part of it is that you have a contract or a grant to implement and you're focused on that, and it can give you a little bit of tunnel vision. And so what I was wondering is if you have any suggestions on solid, kind of tangible metrics for measuring and capturing the benefit of collaboration, other than this general idea that collaborating is a good thing. How do we actually quantify that and show the true benefit of it to help overcome some of this reluctance?
Great, thank you, Beth. Let's take one more so you're not stuck standing there for 10 minutes.
Thank you, I appreciate it. My name is Mireille Cronin-Mather. I'm with the International Rescue Committee. And I'd like to ask the panel, with USAID's new strategy, the Journey to Self-Reliance, they have a big focus on diversifying partners, the localization of aid, and it sounds a little familiar to some of us that have been around for a while. So, we're here in Washington, the majority of us receive our public sector funding. How do we hold our donors to account to really support what good partnership entails? And not just on a project-specific basis, but in a more of a program and sustainable basis.
Great, thank you so much. So I'm going to repeat those. We'll go back to the first question. It was really about how do we build and maintain sustainable partnerships and relationships, especially when they're based on maybe personal relationships that have started the partnership and then those people move on. Who would like to answer that one first? Rémi, thank you.
Okay, probably one of the options is to straighten the networks, because many actors are existing on the ground, and all actors have to bring their knowledge and their proposal, their solutions, and if we try to straighten the existing networks and to address with them the solution, I think is one of the key points.
Great. Burke or Hanne, you want to add to that?
The approach of the Posner Center is to do exactly that, to strengthen our network and to strengthen those bonds, both through kind of institutionalizing relationships through grant projects, or we have a partnership with Regis University on a monitoring evaluation series. So kind of looking at more project or program-driven relationships. But our task is a bit easier because we have a community to work with, and we can kind of strengthen the bonds of the community. All three really easy questions, by the way. Thank you.
I would just add that building into the governance documents kind of the importance of post-event evaluation and follow-up, so that even if relationship holders, even if the handlers for that particular partnership have moved to new pastures, there's still this kind of longevity of the partnership itself. And then I would approach it with kind of a glass half full approach. Presumably that individual is moving to someplace that is still aligned with the mission and the goals of that partnership, and is just a new space where they can transfer their skill set. And so perhaps it opens a new door for a partnership as well.
Great, thank you. So the second question was really about measurement and metrics. And I think, this is something that we all struggle with, that certainly we want to collaborate and we want to partner. But, there's a lot of things on the ground, and the reality of it is that there's definitely barriers to doing this and doing this well. So the question was around what are some tangible metrics that can help us capture the benefits of collaboration, and how do we quantify this, not only for ourselves in the project, but also back to funders? So another super easy question. Who would like to tackle that one first?
I think here, if you undergo an exercise to evaluate staff time, and then quantify that against, the costs of personnel, et cetera, you can better measure the true kind of costs or benefits of partnering. We know partnering takes time, so I won't, pretend to sugarcoat that. But if perhaps through that partnership you're getting access to knowledge from that partnering entity that comes at a level that you wouldn't have been able to hire for or contract for if it's a totally out-of-the-box skill set that doesn't even fit into your purview, that's something you can absolutely measure and build into kind of the evaluation framework. I think looking at market access, bridging out into new demographics and spaces, all of that can be quantified from a data and marketing perspective, but it is a challenge. I think it's also important to look not just at the benefits and measuring the benefits that come at the end of a project, but also identifying and co-creating milestones throughout so that you're, again, keeping people excited and invested in that partnership throughout the duration of its implementation. So it's not just we launched it and then we finished it, but there's exciting moments built in, and undergoing that exercise can also really help with articulating some of the quantifiable metrics.
Great, thank you. Rémi or Burke, would you like to add?
Yeah. Maybe one of the options also is to look, as we want to reduce poverty, to look at the share of incomes. If we look at the supply chain, most of the time we are looking, okay, what is the farmer getting in his pocket at the end of the year, or maybe a little money. But if we want to add value to partnerships, I think if we look at the supply chain, there is a real opportunity to address income increasing for all the actors of the supply chain. And I think that would be a great way to also link private investors, institutions, and family farmers to increase their revenues.
Great, thanks. Burke?
Aside from population impacts and global reduction in poverty, in terms of effective metrics, I mean, collaboration is a process, right? And so you want to see some organizational development going on. So is there knowledge or technology transfer? Are the organizations getting smarter, stronger, better funded through that collaborative process? I think these are they're more process measures, but both in terms of evaluating the collaboration and responding to funders who are supporting that collaboration, these are things that you can kind of point to. Some funders aren't comfortable with that, and they want to see those outcomes as opposed to outputs, and that's part of the struggle, and I think part of really what we're trying to learn from our community.
Great, thank you. I think it's a nice segue into the last question that we heard, which was really about USAID's focus on the journey to self-reliance, their emphasis on diversifying partners, increased localization, and how we hold donors accountable to those principles, and not just on a project basis, but overall. I know that can also be hard, but are there ways that you guys have seen that be done successfully?
I'll go first, and I will say no.
Okay, short and sweet, but that's the reality, right? Rémi or Hanne?
I think it starts with conversations like this, right? Collective action and sharing experiences, sharing goals with peers in a pre-competitive state. And I think that the more that that organizations can collectively work with USAID and other major funders to make sure that the projects themselves are not at odds with each other, right? Sometimes there's a really great concept to address a challenge, and in the same community there's a really great concept to address a separate challenge, but those two projects work at odds against each other, right? And they're siloed out even within some place like USAID because of just the different teams that are handling that. So the more that those groups that are on the ground and locally aware of each other's interventions can connect and make sure that there aren't any kind of projects that are misaligned, I think that it all just starts with enhancing transparency and enhancing conversation.
That's great.
So kudos to this conference for being a space where that can happen.
Rémi, anything to add?
Yeah, I think if we think more about program, long-term investment, we will probably attract more investors into even into the poor regions. For example, in the Sahel region, there is a huge project, we can say, which is the Great Green Wall Initiative, which is a vision from the African Union to make the agricultural resilience on the long term at the agenda of 2063. So it's a 50-year policy. But if we look at the short terms, we always look on solutions to feed people every day, and of course we have to address that, but we need also to invest on the long terms to make the facilities, to make also all infrastructure to be sustainable in order to reply to the long-term needs.
Great, thank you. So I think this timing is great. We have just a few minutes left. It looks like we have 2 remaining questions, so we'll take these 2 questions and call it a panel.
Thank you so much, Beth, and the panel. I want to piggyback on what Bonnie said about the U.S. Model for development. And I'm looking at us in the room and partnerships. If we are thinking about sustainability and these partnerships, the models that we use, are they really intended to sustain what we're doing out there? Because when I look at the partnerships from this level and on the field, a previous speaker mentioned competition, and I wonder whether there is real that honesty and trust amongst us and the people on the ground whom we are intending to hand over the development mantle to. In most of the cases, I see consortiums of very big organizations that intimidate the smaller organizations from coming up. And what is the model for us to really collaborate in the real sense so that there is growth and multiple players on the ground? Thank you.
Great, thank you. Yes.
Thank you. My name is Asfa Hadara, and I am with the African Services Committee based in New York. I'm a former refugee, now returning. So we have programs in Ethiopia. So I am inviting the audience here. Issue of collaboration definitely is the best solution to any given problem. So I heard this morning about from Ms. Bonnie about NPI. Hopefully the door will open. So we have those 5 clinics in Ethiopia. 2 of them currently, we have to close them because of lack of resources. But the 3 of them are very active, effective, and it is a state-of-the-art laboratory that we have. Access to ART treatment to women, children, and young adult girls. We also have nutrition program. Whenever resource is available, also we provide IGA, income-generating activity for destitute mothers, like sheep fattening and poultry farming and small agricultural things. Us here as a grassroots organization, US-based grassroots organization, all our employees, the nurses, the lab technicians, the health officers, the outreach workers are all local and largely women, in fact, because the issue of empowerment of women should come first, and it has to be creating employment opportunity. Then the long term is different. But first comes health, according to our approach. The well-being of women is the well-being of a society. So any one of you here who have a program in Ethiopia, I would love to invite you to collaborate with us. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you. Thanks for that comment, and I applaud the work you're doing in Ethiopia. So let's go back to that first question, which really I think challenges the models that we're using in international development today. Lots of big consortiums that are oftentimes intimidating to local partners and local actors. So if we really want to get to that honesty and trust between partners, what are some of the models that you all have seen that are sustainable in the long term, that really will hand that mantle over to local actors in the communities that we're serving?
Well, maybe one of the key points, I think, is local ownership. Because, in fact, I'm from an NGO, and I know, for example, NGOs are also fighting for grants to implement on the ground. And sometimes also we have to make consortium in order to be together to address a sufficient grant in order to reply to the proposal. So I think this is a model we have to change. But first is really to promote the local ownership in order to get plans for the long terms and in order to also empower this capacity on the ground. I think, as the gentleman from Ethiopia was speaking, there are many resources, and as we want also, one of the key points is to address education, and not only people working at the university level, but really people who are able to really assist or to deliver good services to the local needs, for example, in terms of banks, in terms of IT, in terms of education. I think we really need to invest on the long-term issues.
Thank you, Rémi. Burke, would you like to add anything?
Just to follow up on that, we have a large number of organizations that are taking community-based or community-created approaches, and we've seen those kind of sustain collaborations, human-centered design. Those approaches seem to be creating some resonance and some sustainability. One of my favorite projects right now that we're funding is a collaboration between IDE, which takes market-based approaches to global development, and BEX 360, which is a blockchain technology company. And they are working with the Honduran coffee market to increase access to U.S. distribution. So that is very much working with the Honduran coffee market to address their needs and using technology and IDE's market or distribution channels to make that effective. So that's maybe an example of something that could have success. That's a new project. Looking forward to see the results from that.
Yeah, thank you. Hanne.
I'll just add that IDE won the 2017 P3 Impact Award for their work in Bangladesh, so they have a great market-based approach. So to the lady's point, I am fully in agreement that there are kind of these coalitions, these big name players that are doing phenomenal work and kind of rise to the top of partnering preference lists. But I think to really address the SDGs and to achieve the 2030 agenda at the rate that we need to, you need to flood in new actors, right? And that's about thinking creatively. New private sector players, local NGOs, different NGOs, civil society players, academic universities, all of this. So really looking at the full gauntlet and not just continuing to partner with the same people in the same way you've been doing it. Do all that, but do more, right? Like bring in those new spaces. And so I think from a model perspective, I think it can be really powerful when it's written into the funding agreement that somebody has to have a local partner. And so I think that can force an exercise for people to think creatively and to find new players and to go out and to source those relationships. I think it's really important for companies and for organizations that are investing in partnerships to again create the time and the space for their employees to go about doing that, to have them attend forums like this, to have them have dedicated office time Friday mornings to find new players, to read new research, to understand what's happening, and perhaps in different languages, so that we're not constantly kind of focused on kind of what we see in at least in DC in an English-based resource. And then I think that places like Concordia work really hard to kind of cast that wider net and to expand the player set. So groups like us, groups like Posner, that enhance capacity, that serve as workshop trainings to bring new players into the space. I work really hard for the smaller NGOs who are in our member space to put them alongside influential policymakers and funders so that they can build that one-to-one relationship that enhances their credibility and their relationships that they wouldn't have necessarily gotten to have absent somebody dedicating time and effort to to uplifting that specific issue. And so I think, again, to harp on the value of convening, I don't think it's dead. I don't think it's a waste of time. I think that there's so much value for those groups that want to be partnering to be out there proactively talking about the work they do, the local relationships they have, the impact that it can bring into a project.
Great, thank you. Well, I think that that's a great question to end on, and it just so happens that we're out of time as well, so that timing is perfect. But I want to thank all of you for attending this session. I hope that you all got at least one takeaway today on a way that how to either start or improve a collaboration or partnership at your own organization or even within your organization. So thank you all. Also, let's give one last round of applause to our excellent panelists today and for having them join us.